Natalie, if you need the mic, it's right there. You need to turn it on.
All right, we'll get started. We have lots of information, which I hope it'll be helpful to you. First, I want to introduce the panel. Rory C. Keel is an indie author and owner of Carpe Diem Publishers, and there's his information right there. And he'll tell you more about his process. And then we also have Ryan McSwain. And he did a program for us last year.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. And then Vicki. And she's owner of Yellow City Publishing. And then I'm Natalie Bright, and I'll be the moderator today. So, we are going to go a step by step. Here's some of the things we're going to cover. You have a handout. You have all the slides. Please feel free to take notes, ask questions. We're going to stay here as long as we need to today to answer all your questions. And so the first thing you need to do is take a breath. Because this is a lot of information, but just before we got started this morning, we were standing here talking. Vicki was showing us some of her new projects, and it reminded me of why we're doing this. Is we all have the same end result. We're passionate about this business. We love it. We want a book in hand, and there are tons of ways to get to that point. And that's what's changed in today's indie author, self-publishing. We're now indie authors. And so take a breath. You don't have to do all of this in a 24-hour period. I know it's a lot of information. Like, for example, Monday, you just compartmentalize your time. On Monday, you can register a new book title on Bowker and get your ISBN. On Wednesday, you can work on your cover design. On Saturday, you can upload your cover and your book content. And then the next week, you can research your keywords for Amazon. I mean, that's just I think that's what all of us do, is we have our process and we know, and we just work on it a little bit at a time. Because making stuff is so easy today. So you don't write a book to get rich, you write a book to get busy.
Amen.
We are absolutely in the age of creation. You don't have to ask anybody's permission to create. You can do the illustrations yourself, put them in your book. You can have your granddaughter do the illustrations and put them in your book. Please look at Vicki's book that her granddaughter illustrated. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful job. And that is so exciting to me. If you're the controlling type personality and you like to see a project from inspiration, spark to end, that is exciting. The whole process is exciting, and that's what I like. And we'll let the others talk about theirs. Just this week, I heard on Publishing News that KDP has expanded their distribution in the U.S. and has included large print options. So if you don't know what KDP is, we'll talk about that. Create Space through Amazon is pretty much being replaced by KDP print. Those are the little things, you have to keep up with the industry a little bit at a time. Here's some industry stats for you, and then I'll get to the question, I promise. 7 of the top best-selling ebook authors were self-published. 50 of the top 250 were self-published. 121 of the top 500 were self-published indie authors, and that's from AuthorEarnings.com. That indie authors are making ground, and they're learning how to promote and market, and they're getting their work out there for readers. And when you think about it, second only to the United States, 10% of India's population speaks English. That's 125 million people in India. We haven't even tapped that market yet. 54% of ebook readers or buyers read on their smartphones. So what does that mean? Almost half don't read on their smartphones.
Means they have better eyes than I do.
Really? So that means a smart business tip, you need to consider ebook and print formats, because you have two very distinct markets right there. So the next generation of smartphone users are coming from Brazil, China, India, Indonesia. Those are markets we have not tapped. The next billion users will be changing the internet in key ways. They've never known a world without electronics and without iPhones and e-readers. And it's just amazing, the generation. My kids remind me, look it up, or post it on Twitter. I mean, there are always, everything's electronic. And you are the creators of the content. You are the creators of the original content that the future will read. That's a very powerful position we're in right now. So the last 3 quarters of 2017, 1.3 billion in individually tracked ebook sales, 490 million audiobook, 3.1 billion hardcover and paperback purchases that were purchased online, but that is deceptive because it includes textbooks, academic, professional titles, and board books, which are for children. So that comes under that hardcover. But here's what you need to think about. 90% of the romance readers buy digital. 70% of sci-fi and fantasy readers tell us that they buy only ebooks. 82% of poetry readers buy books in print. 85% dramas and plays are bought in print. So that tells you if you're a poetry writer, you're probably going to want to put your efforts into a hardcover and a print book, because 82% of your readers buy print. And that's also at authorearnings.com. If you want to get real geeky with the numbers, then that's a great, interesting website. All right, here's the question for our panel. Why do you think indie authors are getting noticed in today's publishing industry? And Craig is going to start us off with that discussion.
They're out of order.
And you're out of order.
You're out of order. But, why do I think that indie authors are getting noticed in today's market? In my personal opinion, is I believe that indie authors are getting more noticed today because of the variety of materials. Each one of us have a different story, have a different take on what we like to write. When it was all traditional and you had to go through a traditional publisher, a lot of that material was weeded out because they bought material based upon what they wanted, what they could sell. And so today we have a marketplace where we can write what we want and put it out there, and somebody has the same likes as you do, and it's not weeded out before it gets to print. So that's my personal opinion, why I think that there's more notice of indie authors today.
That's great.
So,
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Well, I think the internet has been a great leveling for everything involved with communication in general, but especially for books. The 3 things that really stood in the way of indie authors being able to succeed in previously is with, when you had a vanity press, you had to have a you had to have a minimum order, you had to have all of these things. With print on demand and ebook options, everyone can put a book up, and you don't need to order 10,000 or even 1,000 or even 10 to get your book out there. And then whereas before, the only place to get a book was at a bookstore that you physically went to. As much as I love bookstores and I hate monopolies and things like that, Amazon has made it where you go and search for a sci-fi book, everybody's books, if you have a good looking cover, your book looks just as good as the big guys. So I think that's incredible. And marketing, now we're able to connect with our audience in incredible ways all over the world. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I have incredible book sales, but I have book sales, and I get royalties from Japan. You know what I mean? There are people all over the world that can find your book, that find you through Twitter or Facebook or your website, and all of these things didn't exist. Well, how old am I now? A few years ago. You know what I mean? And it has totally changed, and the playing field continues to level, and I still want my books in bookstores, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to sell them.
I really have nothing to add to that. I think you guys covered.
Oh, okay.
So,
You do first next time then.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Okay, so it's kind of like a big picture thing. Your big picture is you want a book in hand or you want your books out to readers. And it's just an accumulation of small tasks that you're gonna do to get to that goal. And so you just do each task at a time. What am I gonna do today? Debbie McCumber came and talked to us, Frontiers in Writing, many, many years ago. But one of the most profound things she said is that she does one thing every day to market herself or promote her book. One thing. That's 365 things at the end of the year. And that's kind of how you look at it. So one thing is load your book, I've gone over it, find an ISBN or write a thank you note. Yesterday, it took me 15 minutes to write thank you notes to all the libraries that have hosted my events this summer. One thing, 15 minutes, one thing every day. And that's kind of how I break it down in my world. So the next question is, this is a great quote, I thought. Everybody has a smartphone. The little girl growing up in Bangladesh now has a better library than a student in Columbia. That is just profound to me, the information that's out there. Beatrix Potter, I just love her. She funded her first print run of 250 copies. Peter Rabbit, 45 million copies have been sold around the world. And she is also credited with thinking outside the box. She had patented a Peter Rabbit doll. And then she had stationery, tea sets, wallpaper, blankets. This was way before her time. And that's I think what flexibility is what defines what we do. We have the flexibility to look at anything, to do anything, to create anything that has to do with our writing, our art. It's just a great time to be a creator, I think. So there's several different business models for self-published indie authors, and I'm gonna let the panel weigh in on it. No gatekeeper. If you don't understand what a gatekeeper is, we can answer that question. Remember, you're the president, CEO, CFO of the production. You have a willingness and a desire. You, like someone on the panel mentioned, you relate directly to your readers. You're finding your readers and you have a one-on-one relationship with them. There's also the 20 books to 50K business model, which there is a Facebook group on this, and the theory is if you publish 20 books, you will get 50,000 just because the algorithms and your work is out there. So, if y'all have anything to say about, I'm going fast to the next one. Option A is one name, one genre, one specific brand. If you want to have a brand, you might promote all your books on Kindle, and that's the only thing you want to do, and you may want to advertise on Facebook ads. There's many, many authors. Mark Dawson is one, and he has a podcast. He has one specific genre, his name, his book covers all look like the same, and he loves Facebook. He sells millions of books. Option B is going wide. We'll talk about that, where you have multiple genres, multiple pen names, and you promote across the board on Ingram, Amazon ads, Facebook ads. And we'll talk about those options. So it's just, all this stuff is things for you to think about and figure out what works best for you. So, is being your own boss for everybody, Vicki?
Being your own boss, if you're a writer, means that you write the book, you publish the book, you market the book. You're the entrepreneur. There's a really good book called Author, Publisher, Entrepreneur. I can't remember the name of the author. And it's particularly good if you're writing nonfiction. But it also, if you're setting up your own company and want to publish your own books, it has very good information in it. So I would recommend that you read that before getting started on it. But if you're your boss, you do all of it. Now, that doesn't mean you can't farm some of it out. You can delegate. You can purchase a cover, for example, instead of doing your own. But it means you run your own business. And there's so many different ways to get a book to market now that I think we're going to get into that in some detail. And so hopefully by the end of today, you'll have a pretty good idea of how much you want to keep control of and how much you want to give to somebody else to do. There are all kinds of ways you do it.
I agree with her on the options today. We can vary how much we want to farm out being your own boss. I will say that as an aspiring author, when I started into wanting to write, it was all I could do to write. And then I got into publishing, and it's about all I can do to publish. So I will tell you that, you have to decide how much you want to do, because the publishing side of it, the marketing of it is a full-time job, just like writing is. So you just need to be aware that it may not be for you, the publishing side of it, but set up your own business as an author and then determine how much of it you want to do by yourself.
All right, well, I consider myself a self-starter, and if I was in a job interview, I would definitely say, oh, I'm very much a self-starter. The only problem is none of us are perpetual motion machines. And so while I'm a self-starter, I am not able to do that forever. So, but my goal is to be my own boss and to eventually be other people's bosses. And I would love to be able to find somebody like, for instance, Natalie is incredible at marketing and reaching out and networking and doing those things. Like if I could find someone like Natalie and hire them to do all the things that I'm terrible at. So my goal is to keep doing those things as well as I can until I can spread out and get someone to do that for me. And I have had the opportunity to be other people's bosses in a small way when I hire people to do like the formatting for your book or the cover for your book. And then for Four Color Bleed, I worked with about a dozen people to get that to fruition in terms of artists and designers and things like that. And it is a lot of work to boss people around. It really is, especially when it's almost half a favor and half the other way. I've managed volunteers in the past, and I thought when you were paying somebody it would be a lot easier, and it turned out that's not always the case. So, all right, yeah, of course.
Part of whether or not you want to be your own boss and how much you want to take on yourself has to do with your budget. So
That's exactly true.
you need to know if you hire somebody to format your book, if you hire somebody to do your cover, obviously that's going to cost you some money. But when you put it all together, sometimes there is an advantage in going to somebody who works with other people because they can lower the price on some items. And so you just have to look around and shop and find out what fits your budget.
And I think you brought up a good point. It's open-minded. People who have just one way, their way, the highway, and they have this vision of what they want, they miss out on all the opportunities if they could work with this person or that person, or maybe the photograph for the cover is not going to work like you want. Okay, what's my option B, C, and D? Because I've talked, so many people get on that one trail, and this is what they want for the cover, and they're going to do that. And you have to be flexibility, right? Again, is the key word. It's like when you ski down a hill, you don't go straight down the hill. You go from side to side and work your way down as the mountain. So there's not a indie author university, but we just kind of all jumped in and.
But we're going to trademark that.
And the first few Rescue Animal Series books I uploaded on Kindle a year ago was they couldn't be read on the Kindle. There were color photographs that were too big of a file, and it showed that it was under the limit. But when you tried to pull them up on the Kindle and you ordered them, it couldn't be loaded. And so I didn't find that out till like a year later. After they'd been out there a year, I couldn't figure out why they weren't moving. And so my husband said, "You need to fire your quality control department."
I do have a question for you.
Oh, yes.
So when you uploaded those, did you check them with the Kindle Previewer?
I
And it did show it?
Yes.
That's, oh my gosh.
I know. But moving on.
So then you need a friend to upload it too.
Yes. All right. Should I use a pen name?
Yes.
Let's talk about that. Author branding. Remember, this is you. You're going to have to live with this. This is the big picture, long goals. Who did I have assigned to this? Oh, right.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, see, I'm an expert on this because I do not use a pen name. But I did think about this a lot because, especially, Four Color Bleed is a happy-go-lucky book. I mean, you read it and you feel good at the end. Monsters All the Way, I can only remember the working title for some reason. But Monsters All the Way Down is a violent horror story full of really gross things. And I thought to myself, like, I'm a Cub Scout leader. I work with, you know what I mean? And when they asked me to do it, I was like, man, I hope they don't read my book. Because I'm pretty sure there's a yard full of kids buried in my book. You know what I mean? I would never hurt anyone, but my characters will hurt a lot of people. So when you're thinking about a pen name, you want to take into account how much you want to be associated with your stuff. And I said, you know what? I have the coolest name, so I'm just kidding. So I decided to keep with my name, but I have come up with a couple of reasons recently that I've seen where I said, oh man, maybe I should have gone with the pen name. For one, getting reviews for your book is really difficult. And I just found out that Amazon's algorithm may block people from giving you a review if you know them personally. It doesn't always happen. I know Kim recently was able to get some really excellent reviews from her friends in the publishing world that looked great, and they were there at launch. But I actually in January, we may discuss this later, but in December and January, I was kicked off of Kindle for manipulating, and I can't imagine what I did, but I think it may have been associated with some of my reviews being from people I knew personally, because they know. I've even heard that if you're friends on Facebook, that they won't allow you to review each other's work. So that might be a key. That might be a reason to have a pen name. I think it bears more research. And then one other thing I can think of is, if any of you are familiar with the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, they were multi-billion-dollar blockbusters. So of course we've heard of them. The director was fired yesterday from those movies because of things he had written on Facebook, or it's not on Facebook, but on Twitter and other places, like over a decade ago.
It was bad stuff.
And it was bad stuff. I think it was tongue-in-cheek. I'm not going to get into any of that because it was really stupid to say those things and then work for Mickey Mouse. But if you're worried at all about your life and your publishing, I think there are definite reasons to have a pen name. I just chose not to.
Can I ask a question, or do they have to be?
You're more familiar.
No, yeah.
Go for it.
Okay. How would they know you know the person? In other words,
I believe Amazon is able to see who you're friends with on Facebook, and there's algorithms that crawl. And I honestly think it might have been why I was temporarily, but horrifically banned from Kindle.
okay, because I have asked.
Oh, we have an
I have
answer
the
right
answer,
there.
because I actually heard this probably 3 years ago.
Yeah.
From when it first became an issue. If your Facebook account and your Amazon account are linked, they know who all your friends are. They know who all your families are. If someone has the same last name with you,
Yeah.
pity you if your last name is Smith or Brown.
Yeah.
Or Black. Or Black.
Mm-hmm.
Because if somebody comes in with the same last name as you, because it's all automated, so there's no human interaction there.
And I think
So
we'll
That's
talk
good
about,
to know.
That pings on our nose.
and we may talk about it later, but it is very hard to talk to an actual
Yeah, I
person
have
that
it
can do
down.
anything about it. So I'm actually going to be, I was putting a huge focus on getting reviews, and I'm actually not going to worry about that as much as just getting sales. And
What about Goodreads? Is that the same thing?
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm not sure about Goodreads is
Amazon
connected
bought
with Amazon.
Amazon
So
bought Goodreads.
Yes.
So
Okay.
yeah, Big
That
Brother and Big
answers-
Sister are now the same.
Boy, that's good to know.
Yeah, but I think this is one of those developing things, and as self-publishing continues to change, I think these issues are going there. I've seen so many people affected by it that I wouldn't be surprised if it changed, but it's something to keep in mind for now.
As far as pen name, I have a pseudo pen name. It's actually my real name, but it's a different name that I go by in personal life. My friends call me Craig. I'm a middle name child. So that's what I've been called all my life. And when I started writing, I decided I needed a little better name. And so I went by my first name, which is Rory. So my writer's name is Rory C. Keel, It's still my name, but it sounds a little more writerly. So, anyway,
That sounds right.
and it's, I use it not because don't like the association of my material or anything, I just think it sounded a little better, so that's why I went by my first name.
Well, I've had 3 names in real life, so adding another one was just not something I wanted to do in this life. And I have a first name that can be spelled about 50 different ways. I have a last name, Shane, which people mispronounce and misspell all the time. But my maiden name was Malin, which people also misspell and mispronounce. And then there was Jacobs, which is an ex-husband. And so I'm thinking, I don't think I want to use his name. And I just didn't want another one. So I just settled on the one I had and figured, people find Ivanovich, and that's kind of crazy too. The one thing that I really did, when I really did seriously consider a pen name, was when my granddaughter did my illustrations. Excuse me, she was 8 when she drew the pictures. And so I've talked to several people about that. And I asked her what she wanted to do. Well, she wanted credit for what she'd done. She wanted her name on that book. I said, you can have a pen name, you can use your name, or you can just put A Child Like Derek. And she said, that's what I want. My name, A Child Like Derek. And I said, no. We're not gonna do that. Because that puts her in the situation of being identified.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and her name's Avina, and it was misspelled on the cover the first time. But anyway, it got fixed. But with children, you do want to be careful, and I talked to a lot of folks about it, and think that we're okay.
I've got one more short.
Okay.
We're slightly touchy subject, but we do also have to remember that there's a very large group of people who write erotica. And I think for erotica writers, that might be one where you might want the pen name in order to be to keep your life separate. And there are other genres. I don't know about romance writers specifically, but there are some where the fans are just a little bit interesting in terms of, and I'm not, that's not a generalization about all readers of different things. I mean, and that's, of course, there are interesting characters in all genres of reading. But there might be some where you would appear at a convention and you might not want to have to deal with some people. And if that makes any sense, I'm sorry if I'm being offensive or anything like that, but I just think there are certain genres you might want to separate things out for more freedom.
If you go by a pen name, go by the pen name, and don't confuse the two. In other words, if you go to a writer's, if you go sell a book somewhere at a convention, go by your pen name, if that's what you choose. Otherwise, there's no use in getting a pen name if you're gonna sign your books as your real name. Set up your business as your pen name.
Yeah, you're paying a DBA and things like that.
Yes.
Thank you, that was great.
Sorry.
So publishing a book, you can go all in like us and publish stuff for other people. Some of us do that, publish your own work. You can publish one book. And that's what I want you to realize, the possibilities of today. If you want to write all of your history of your family and print off 10 books and hand them out at your next family reunion, you can do that. And you can put family photos in it. It's just amazing time to be creative. So you build your brand around your name, whatever name you choose, but it takes time to build that. It takes time to get Twitter followers and blogs. I started a newsletter on MailChimp in November with 11 people that I actually typed in myself, my family, and now I have 52. I don't know where they came from, but I think that's kind of cool. So now I've got to send them something, I guess. Wordsmith 6, our critique group. Rory and Mandy are part of that. We started that how long ago? Oh, Barbara's here. Barbara's part of that. We started that how long ago? 6 years?
Probably 6.
And we have over 500 followers now on our Wordsmith 6 blog. We blog about writing. So if you love this business, Indie Author might be for you. If you love the business, you love writing, you love the promotion, you love the control, that's what it's all about. Why did you choose the Indie Author and self-publishing business model, Craig?
You don't want to confuse.
Yeah.
Rory, sorry.
She gave me away. Revealed who I really.
You're Rory C. Keel.
Yeah. So, why did I choose the self-publishing? Well, I'll be honest with you, it was my second choice. My first choice wanted to be traditional. And I guess it's through vanity because I wanted somebody to buy my work. And so I set out to do that first, and I achieved that. Had several places, magazines buy my work, Chicken Soup for the Soul. If any of you want to start off and have somebody buy your work, apply to Chicken Soup for the Soul. You're not going to be a millionaire, but you're going to make a little money. They, on their website, they have different topics, usually every month, that you can write stories about, things they're looking for. They pay $200 for a story, but then you can buy the books at wholesale. But it will give you some acknowledgement and exposure. It make, you sold something.
That's great. I think that's good advice.
Yeah, and I sold some to several devotional magazines. And so on my journey to have somebody publish me or buy my work, I accomplished that. I'm kind of like Ryan here, he's self-motivated. And so my next goal was to publish myself. I have my own books published, which we've succeeded in that. And so we're just moving forward from that. And that's why I chose to do this. It's because I wanted to.
I'm publishing my own because I'm 74 years old and I can't wait for somebody to decide they want to publish it.
Amen.
I'll be dead before then. So if you want to get it out, just do it yourself.
Amen.
Yeah, my first book, I tried to go the traditional route because I thought, well, one of my other loves is movies. And a lot of movie makers get their starts in horror. They make horror movies and you just throw blood on it and it looks great. You know what I mean? So I thought books might be the same thing. It would be an easy thing to break into. In fact, most agents won't even read it. And so it's very, very hard to break in. And I went to every agent I could find. I had lots of people, well, that's an exaggeration, but I had several people ask for full manuscripts. And I had a small publisher. I made it to the final round on that, and it just didn't work out. And the process takes a very long time, I found out. And during that process, Travis Irwin spoke at one of these meetings, and he spoke about how he went through like a 2-year process with one of his books. Everybody loved it, but then they decided they couldn't market it, so that it didn't come out. And I said, man, I've already been working at this for a year, and I could do another 2. I want to get this other thing. I said, you know what? I'm just going to publish the thing. And it got out, it gets good reviews. Doesn't make me $1 million, and that's okay because that'll come later when I have 18 more books written. Exactly. So we'll get to that. But once I finished that and I got to the second book, I said I had this very specific vision. It's illustrated. I knew exactly what I wanted to be. I said, I've already put one book out. I'm just going to do it again. And a lot of people, I wouldn't mind if this led to a traditional publishing route. I would definitely try and be savvy and keep my ebook rights and things like that. But I think self-publishing has been fantastic. I'm glad I chose it. So. Okay, sorry.
I think most of you know my story. I did have a literary agent that I met at a writer's conference, and that was a 7-year process. I had a whole body of work, and he couldn't sell it because I wrote nice westerns set in Texas. And that was about the time Hunger Games came out. And so, it was a sad time when I realized nobody wants my work. It's not for mainstream. It's just not ever going to be. And so I'm glad that I got control back because if you go traditional, it is a long time and it's a big empty space of what's going on because you never know what's going on. I mean, he had his 5 editors that he worked with, and that's where he sent my stuff, and he didn't send it anywhere else. And that's good. That works for him. It's business is business. It's nothing personal. But then when you're in control of your business, you know what's going on. And you do have to fire your quality assurance department. So, building your team, let's talk about what are you willing to do yourself? What did you hire out and why? And Vicky's gonna start us off on that.
Let's just start.
Okay.
Where's my script?
Okay. Well, what I do for my books, is that on? I taught middle school, so I think I could be heard probably in the next block if I needed to be, but, what I do for my books is I decided that I could format it myself using Vellum. Do you wanna get into that now, or you wanna wait on that a little?
I have a slide
Okay,
later for that.
all right. So I formatted myself. I did not have the tools to do a cover design. So that I bought, and I used a company called selfpubbookcovers.com, and they have literally thousands and thousands of covers to choose from. Once you buy it, nobody else can ever have it. And they had one that just fit the book that I wanted. Now, I will tell you that of the books that I have up there, some of those are ones I published for other people. 2 of them use self-pub book covers. Another one used a local person, and I will give you her name because she did a really nice job on that. Her name is Malin Miller, and her contact information is memillerdesigns@gmail.com, or you can text her at 806-681-6300. Yes.
I've used self-pub book covers also. It's a great resource, and I found exactly what I wanted there. But I will mention that if you do buy from them, it's yours, but you can't change what they've got because they copyright the exact image. So you can't go, you of course put your own text on there and then your book is on, but you can't decide you want the flower to be blue instead of red or something. You have to use what they've got, or you go back to them and ask their permission to get the artist to give an okay to change anything on the design.
Yeah, that's right. So you also have to go outside to purchase an ISBN. And I would love to be able to go outside to buy some marketing expertise, but I don't have that much money. So I do the marketing myself, I do the formatting myself. And then I use Ingram Spark to distribute. That's another part.
You use what, Ingram Spark?
Ingram Spark.
Ingram Spark.
I think we got a slide.
Yeah,
Spark.
we'll talk about
We'll talk
that.
about
You know, you have to decide how much of the process you want to do. In what I do all of it. I do the formatting, book covers, the whole thing. I have all of the software, Photoshop, Vellum. I have all of that. So in part of my, it goes back to my desire to set goals. I want to achieve everything. So I do a little bit of everything so I can say I've done it all. Whether I continue to do that or not is a whole different deal, but I like to at least know what the process is on every step of the way. I do have other people lined up, editors, graphic artists, things like that, in case those are needed. In the process of publishing for people, those are extra costs. You know, if you want professional editing, professional book covers, those add costs to your book. So what you can't do yourself, that just adds to the price of what you're doing. So.
And I would definitely recommend hiring an editor. Even though you're really good at grammar and you're really good at writing, you're gonna miss your own mistakes. And it's really critical that the copy be clean.
Yes, I was definitely gonna add that. In my experience, if you are comfortable doing it, I would say you can do it. If you feel, because we're writers and we're good at writing, everyone here is good at writing. That doesn't necessarily mean we're good at graphic design. I mean, they're only tangentially related, not even very. But for 4-Color Bleed, I did all the layouts and the ebooks. I did hire someone to do the cover that I found out of the Netherlands. Another great thing about the internet, you can find people all over the world who will do really good work. And I would, for me, I would never do my own cover just because I'm not gifted in that area, but I have an idea of what I want. And because I write in a little stranger genres, I can't go on self-pub covers and get one of those. If I did do, I think that would definitely be a great option if you do mainstream genre. It seems like a really good resource. For me, finding a ready-made cover wasn't really an option, so I found someone who I could come to with some ideas and some inspirations, and they have given me great stuff. For Four Color Bleed, I actually hired someone to do some cover art, and then I had my designer use that art. And then I hired Philip Gessert, and we've talked about to do layout and design for the interior because it's illustrated inside, and I hired people to do that as well and paid them after raising money from a Kickstarter. I do feel a disclaimer with Philip Gessert. When Vicky used him, he took quite a while to get back, but his work was very good. And he was moving across the country at the time, so maybe we'll give it. And he also took a while with you. With me, my turnaround was pretty quick, and I, especially compared to all of the other people I was working with on my projects. My cover design guy, Rory Harnden, if you want information about him, it's on my book covers, but I'd also be happy to share it with you. He has a really good turnaround. He's been nothing but professional, and I would recommend him 100 times over. And I had a wonderful experience with Mr. Gessert, and I'd recommend him 100 times over. So, yes, ma'am.
You said you used Kickstarter to raise funds
Yes.
for your publishing?
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yes, and I could do a whole thing on that, but it worked out for me by the skin of my teeth. So, but I did want to add, definitely find someone to proofread. You want as many eyes on your book as you possibly can before it goes out. If you're not already in a critique group, that's a great part of that process because they will catch things you will be kicking yourself all week for missing. And I also, on both books, I hired someone to be a proofreader. On my second and on my second book, I hired someone to do proofreading and editing, and to give feedback on layout and that. Because I don't know if we'll speak about this later, but there are kind of two types of editor that you'll be working with, and it's different words get thrown around. Basically, there's proofreading, which just goes through and finds your grammatical errors and spelling mistakes, and there will be so many of them. Because when you have 100,000 words, you have 0.5% wrong. That's a lot of words. So, but then that's proofreading. But then there's also another kind of editor, and I'm forgetting what you might, a content editor, or developmental editing or content editing, and they'll say, you know what, this doesn't work at all. Get that out of there. And that's the kind of you also want one of those. And one of the nice things about being your own boss, you can say, no, I love that, it's staying. I like that as well. But anyway, I think you'd be very foolish to publish something without a proofreader, or at least as many friends that will do you that favor as possible. Yes, in the back.
I wanted to go back to that, Roy, that chicken soup with the salt.
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you look up on the internet instead?
Just go to the chickensoup.com, I think it is.
Chickensoup.com.
And usually they'll have a section for books they're looking for, stories they're looking for, submission guidelines. Submit your story. Then this section will have several different topics they're looking for that they're planning on publishing, like in the next year.
Okay.
And they'll like best stories from your favorite dog, or cat stories, or tell us about your mom, or whatever. Pardon me. I know they had one about grandparents, and I think the deadline is August 31st. So stories on grandparents. So, and you submit your story, and then it goes through their process, and then they'll send you a reply. If they accept it, if they don't, they won't reply past the deadline. Usually if they accept it, it'll be before the deadline. They'll say, we want your story. They may want to make changes to it and say, here's the changes we want to make. I know mine, they wanted to make the change to the title. They didn't like my title, so when they said, we want to make these changes, I said, great. Get after it. So But that's a good start. You're not gonna be a millionaire, but hey, you know, $200 is $200.
Yeah.
You know, for,
That's the going rate, but that's a good return.
and it's not limited to just one book. You could write stories for all of them they're looking for. I know they have a section on there that, well, they send an e-letter to those that are Chicken Soup authors and communicate, or Chicken Soup Communicate is what it's called. But you'll get that quarterly or every month, or I can't remember how often it is, but there's people on there that make a living with Chicken Soup books. They write stories, they get published in those, and then they take those books and they have book signings and sell those books, and they have 5 or 6 Chicken Soup books that they're in. So, I mean, that's a way to get into publishing your stories, so.
I had one more short thing to add on. Sorry, I forgot to add this for what you should do yourself and what you should hire out. One quick addition is that, especially on this first one, it was a huge learning curve to learn how to format a book and how to arrange it for ebook and print. It was a great thing to learn how to do for me, because it's something I use, and I use it in my newsletter when I put out short stories, when I actually get my newsletter out. But learning how to do those things, it took me a couple of months of banging my head against the wall. And that was 2 months where I wasn't writing. So please remember, your time is valuable. It's sort of like driving all over town to find gasoline that's a few cents cheaper. You're losing money. So if it's something that you feel like you're going to use, acquiring skills, everybody in here is very intelligent, or they wouldn't be here, in my opinion. You are always acquiring tools for your toolbox. And so if you want to add a tool to your toolbox, do it. But if that tool is more expensive than just renting the tool, just do it that way. So that's my last 2 cents on that.
That's very good advice.
Actually, in Shamrock this past weekend, Route 66 Festival, there were probably about a handful of people. I remember asking Craig, "You're a Chicken Soup author?" That is a huge draw.
It is.
That book is a huge draw. Everybody knows Chicken Soup. It's a
And we
fun
sold
place to
some
start.
books, Chicken Soup.
Yeah, that was my first one, or that was one of how I got started too, in 2010. And I still get to communicate. So now that was kind of an introduction. We kind of just glossed over everything. Next, we're going to really get into the meat of everything and talk about specific issues. And so let's talk about Amazon. And Craig's going to get, or no, Ryan does that. Craig's going to do Ingram. I think he's going to weigh in on all of them. So we'll get down to the specifics.
Natalie, do we want to take a 10-minute break now?
Do we want to break now or wait till 11-ish?
I was going to say, if we're going to get into the meat, we might.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, I need coffee.
Great idea. All right, thank you. All right, so when we come back from break,